collegefootballnerds.com. I'm going to talk UCF and LSU really quickly. We ran a little long on some other videos, and y'all, it's Christmas time when we're recording this one, so we want to get it done, get it recorded, and get y'all some content. UCF fans have been crazy rabid on Twitter the last couple of weeks, so we really wanted to make sure we got this game in. It is interesting because of the matchup, but it is very deflating. I think this game will be marked more by who's not in this game than who is in this game. Huge blow on the UCF side with McKenzine Milton getting hurt, although they did bounce back in a big win against Memphis, ironically beating them bigger than they did with McKenzine Milton. LSU, you want when you're facing a high-flying offense and you had easily the best secondary in the country all year, you want your two best players from that secondary to be there, but they are not. Fulton and Greedy Williams are getting ready for the NFL. I had a whole rant about that in another video. I'm not going to talk about it here. I will say, though, I think it's kind of a slap in the face to your boys who might need you in this game to improve their draft stock. They got you where you are, and now you kind of let them go. But anyway, don't want to get into that. So Josh, let me know. And for those of you who don't know, we are a pretty nerdy stats driven channel. We have a computer model we'll break out here in a second. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Let us know in the comments. This is your only job after you hit that subscribe button. So let us know in the comments what you think the score is going to be and back it up with data and not flamethrowing. All right, Josh, this game with these key pieces out, it's going to throw our model way off for starters. But secondarily, for LSU and UCF, I think it's an opportunity to sort of legitimize what these fan bases have been saying about these teams all year. But is this a game that is going to be decided on either side by who's not in it, and doesn't really give us any opportunity to legitimize either side?
I think to a certain degree, it's almost inevitable this game is going to be decided or at least skewed, right, by who's not in the game. If you looked at LSU this year, it's almost impossible to underscore how important Fulton and Greedy Williams were to that defense. That was probably the best corner tandem in college football. I felt like Fulton's eligibility this year for LSU was a 1 or 2 game swing. I don't know if you disagree with that.
No, I think it's
fair. Fulton, everybody knows Greedy Williams as this first-round draft pick corner. I think Fulton is grossly underrated. I think Fulton has a very good chance of being the better NFL corner of the two. They were outstanding, and they gave everybody fits all year. Just a great, great secondary. And to lose both those guys in this game is crushing, because Kerry Vincent and Kelvin Joseph or Terrence Alexander, whoever they line up at corner, I'm not fully sure at this point who exactly it's going to be at the time of recording, frankly just aren't on their level. And it's not even really close. And on the other side of the ball, you know, as he said, we've been higher than a lot of people on UCF, and it's because of McKenzine Milton. McKenzine Milton is a phenomenal quarterback, and we've done some draft stuff in the past. I don't know if we're going to do more of it in the future. I think there's a chance we will. But something that I brought up with Patrick Mahomes, and it's not like we were out in front of Patrick Mahomes being a superstar guy, but something I've always said about him in general is it's rare to see quarterbacks that can throw the ball from any arm angle. And it is a massive advantage to a quarterback if you're able to throw a football off angle with accuracy. Quarterback success, number one, is accuracy. You have to have enough velocity to be successful at the level of play you have, because windows close at a certain speed, and if you can't get the ball there before the window closes, none of it matters. But by and large, the thing that determines your success is accuracy. Milton is accurate really regardless of his body position, which lets him release the ball anytime he wants. He doesn't have to reset his feet, and lets him take advantage of any window he wants. So he's a freak. Not having him in this game completely changes the dynamic of the UCF offense, because I think they're still going to be a pretty good team. I think they're still a successful team. I think Derek Mack is a good quarterback. Derek Mack can't scramble, have a guy in his face sort of turn and flick his wrist and sidearm a ball 15 yards downfield with accuracy. LSU is going to be able to do some things to disrupt him that they didn't see the past couple games. Again, Memphis, they threw the ball for 12 yards per carry against, or 12 yards per attempt against Memphis. Memphis has given up that kind of yardage a few times this season. They gave up 12 yards per attempt to Missouri and other really good teams they played. I think that's going to be a major impact. So it's hard to balance, and it's kind of interesting because on one side you have the quarterback missing, the other side you have the corners. Who gets impacted more, and does it neutralize itself on both sides? Because I think if you had the backup quarterback versus LSU starting corners, it'd be hard for UCF to really move the ball effectively in this game. That would be extremely difficult. And if the opposite was true, where the corners are out and Milton's in this game, I'd be really worried, honestly, if I was LSU. And now we just have no flipping clue how that's going to turn out.
You talked in our live show about how, we talked about how the Memphis win was kind of a big deal given that they were replacing such a key cog at quarterback. And you mentioned how a lot of that was built on the run game, and they just ran it, and that sort of was the crutch they could lean on to get through that game, to get to this one. LSU hasn't been a great, by LSU standards, run defense this year. Still not bad inside the SEC. When we talk about having to compare conference to conference and P5 versus G5 schedules, the numbers get really screwy. But if LSU isn't a great SEC run defense or a great run defense by LSU standards, but they're still good, is that good enough to be the difference in this game? Because because good in the SEC is elite in any G5 schedule. I don't care what you say. That's the truth. Is that going to be enough? Because then that really does expose the lack of McKenzine Milton.
I think that's the question, and I think it's hard to answer. I know a lot of UCF fans don't like hearing strength of schedule, strength of schedule, strength of schedule. We are a data-driven predictive channel. We are big on talking about talking points, not just we're not slaves to data. We don't tell you here's what the advantage is in the run metric, and that's why they win the game, period. A lot of times we talk about why data maybe lies to you, why stuff isn't accurate, and really we're trying to use the data to back up our points that we make usually through the eye test ourselves. It's virtually impossible to distinguish what UCF did in their conference versus what LSU did in the SEC. I think the Memphis, Missouri data point is really concerning. The fact that Memphis was a very successful team in that conference, the team that gave UCF the best game, right? And Memphis really got run out of the building by Missouri, who was not really a top level team in the Southeastern Conference. That's concerning. That tells me the level of competition is probably quite disparate. But one game does not, a reality make. You can't work transitive property that way. Georgia got blown out by LSU. LSU lost to Florida, and Georgia blew out Florida. Things don't work that way in college football. So I do think LSU's run defense probably is going to fare a lot better against a Group of 5 level team. And I say that because if there's one area where Power 5 teams have a distinct advantage, usually over Group of 5 teams, it's running the ball more often than not. I have always stated the way that you consistently win against Group of 5 teams is by having a great rushing attack. And if you look at teams that lose random Group of 5 games, it's almost always teams that have to throw the ball because the run game isn't dominant. It's because of depth. It's because of the size of offensive lines and the talent level of the offensive lines, because of the size and talent level of the backs, size and talent level of the linebackers. All that stuff comes into play. That physicality works and it sort of turns. And if you can run the ball well, you can have success. And it's not always completely true. I mean, you've certainly seen it the opposite when Utah shocked Alabama several years ago. They ran the ball very effectively in that game, but they did it mainly because they were able to pass the ball to a large extent. So I do think LSU probably is going to have more success. But to your point, when they lost to Alabama 29-0, they gave up almost 8 yards per carry in that game. Georgia's backs, I think, both averaged, 6 yards per carry? I think Holyfield did. LSU has struggled against run offenses consistently, even when they've been successful. So there's going to be opportunities to run the ball. The issue is LSU's pass defense is extremely good, We just don't know how much the drop-off is with the missing corners.
Yeah, and they're also not a prototypical LSU super great pass rush defense either. So I think there'll be time to throw the ball, but you've still got great safeties, and I would say probably by G5 standards, great corners. There's not going to be a lot of depth there, but also having a month to prepare is huge in this game. Okay, so talk about this a little bit. Central Florida, UCF coming in this game. Last year, our computer model predicted them to beat Auburn pretty big. The final margin was not that big, and I think the model struggled a little bit with this G5 versus P5 schedules, disparate data, but also we said last year UCF was a better team than this year UCF. Last year, a healthy Auburn, because they weren't healthy at running back. I don't think the motivation thing is a huge key in this one. I don't think if LSU loses this game, it's fair to say, well, LSU wasn't motivated. They lost their last game of the season to A&M. They weren't playing for a national championship. I think this is a big game to them. So I don't think that's a fair excuse in this one. If we look at Auburn, a healthy Auburn last year, is that a better team than the LSU team that Central Florida is going to face in this one?
I think a healthy Auburn last year, probably so. But Auburn was such a one-trick pony without Kerryon Johnson. It's hard to evaluate. LSU ended up being a really good team this year. I mean, they were. I think LSU defensively this year is a lot better than Auburn was last year. I think the question is, how does LSU's offense compare to Auburn's offense last season? That's a tough thing to say. Auburn played at times a lot better than LSU played this year last season. Auburn at times played worse than LSU played this year. I don't really know how that shakes out. But I do think LSU's defense is probably a notch or two better than what Auburn fielded last season.
And they've got a better player. My concern is they have a better player in Devin White than UCF's seen all year. But Auburn had good stars in that defense. They had one or two really good players, and then weren't great in the secondary, and it just kind of all fell apart. So I wonder if we're going to see some of that again. Let's go ahead and look at the numbers, see what the model says. If we're looking at some more of the same we saw last year with G5 versus P5 and those numbers getting screwy.
So our model is a per-play driven model. It's a relational model, so it looks at how you do versus other teams versus how they did against everybody else. And it uses that to project how you're going to do based off your matchups against your opponent in this game. Everything's purely relational. There's no variables that I add in. The scoring model is actually self-learning, so every team has a unique scoring model based off your own history this season. Factors in, how if you score off turnovers and that kind of stuff, but it mainly is looking at what kind of production you've needed to be successful, how many points you've scored on it. LSU usually needs a lot of yardage to score a lot of points because they're more pro style offense than most, and they're run based. Some teams can score a lot of points without a ton of per play offensive production. So the first statistic we usually generate is a neutral statistic, which is a percentage of opponent averages allowed. If your opponent's average 5 yards per play and you allow 4, you allow 80% of their averages. LSU's allowed teams to have 90% of their rush averages, 79% of their passing averages. It's a lot easier to hold teams below their numbers on the run than the pass. We never see the pass numbers get really below 70%. Very, very, very rarely has that ever happened. This year, Clemson's holding teams to 55% of the rushing averages. So 90% is a merely above average number. It's not a great number. And you can sort of dispute that, but it's a neutral fact. LSU's held teams to 90% of their averages. So whatever their average is normally, they hit about 90% of it. But their pass defense has been very, very good at 79%. UCF is similarly built, actually, but kind of worse. So UCF's allowed teams to have right at their rushing averages and 89% of their passing averages. So they held teams a little bit below what their passing average is and right at whatever their normal rushing yardage is going into a game. Huge caveat here. Our model can't really tell the difference between the AAC and the SEC. it cannot say whether UCF. It's more or less saying UCF played equal competition in the SEC to a large degree. It's not completely true because a lot of the AAC teams struggled out of conference. That does factor into the model to a certain extent, but I just can't fully compensate for the differences in quality of competition here. I really can't. So it's pretty disparate. And I say that because UCF has allowed 100% of AAC team averages. LSU allows an SEC team, by and large, 89% of their average. So you have to throw that caveat, and it's pretty important, I think. And it's important when you look at what the resultant numbers are. LSU is expected to get 4 yards per carry, 6.5 yards per attempt. That's pretty much our competency number on both of them. Our mark is about 4 yards per carry and 6.5 yards per attempt. So they're competent on both sides, neither good nor bad. UCF's expected to move the ball better according to our model, 5.2 yards per carry, 7.5 yards per attempt. That's a 5.1 to 6.2 yard per play advantage. And based off scoring production, that's a 39 to 20 UCF win predicted by our model.
We saw some of this last year. So I do think there's...
Again, our model last year had UCF winning 43 to 27 over Auburn for the same kind of reasons.
Yeah, we struggle. The model's going to struggle right now because conferences are isolated. So not just struggle, the model, we struggle with style clashes and how those hold up. I'm a little concerned. So I came into this kind of blind. I didn't have a pick ready because I just wanted to talk through it and think about it. The model, the interesting point to me is the rush D. I don't know, passing D. Group of 5 teams on average, I think, are better passing teams than what LSU has this year. I think group of 5 offenses in terms of scheme are better than what LSU has this year, though they don't have the players, the physicality. The rush D scares me, but then again, LSU's running game doesn't scare me a lot, so I don't know what to do with that. LSU, you'd have to adjust that pass defense number with the 2 best players on the defense out, except for Devin White. I've got to go with UCF in this one, and I can't believe I'm saying this without a starting quarterback in McKenzine Milton. I'm going UCF in this one. Barely. And I think it's because I don't think LSU is going to be able to take advantage of the things they need to take advantage of to get a win here. I just still have very little faith in their offense. And I hate to say that because they had 31 points on A&M before that marathon game happened in overtime. So that's not a bad number. Give me UCF 30, LSU 27.
So I hear you, and I have a lot of the same concerns. And I think this game is a giant unknown, really. I don't know how the losses of these 2 corners is going to affect LSU. I don't think anyone does. And it's easy to say, well, Fulton got hurt, and they didn't have Fulton for a lot of the A&M game. And that game may have been in the 70s in scoring because it went into 348,000 overtimes. It tied the record with 7, right? But I think an underrated point, A&M threw the ball 51 times in that game. They completed only 23 of those, and it was for only 5.6 yards per attempt. 45% passing. A&M had a miserable day throwing the football in that overtime game, despite the 72-74 score. A&M got to that score because they were in the red zone, and they'd throw an incompletion and an incompletion, and they get an incompletion, get a pass interference, throw an incompletion, and then finally throw a touchdown pass on an amazing catch. That's how that went. That's how they got their points. If you didn't watch that game start to finish, I don't think you quite know the story there. So I do think LSU's pass defense will be okay. But that was with Greedy Williams. I don't know how much that extra guy... You're essentially replacing your number 1 guy with your number 4 guy in a nickel package, or a dime, which you'll probably have to play, which makes the depth issue even worse because now you got to really pull down the depth chart. All that said, I still I still think LSU, I think, will be a little more motivated. I think really the key here is Milton being out. I don't trust the backup quarterback in this situation to be accurate enough to exploit LSU, which means it relies on the run game. It's a total projection, but I do think LSU's run defense and run offense are going to be successful. I think one of the big keys here that we really haven't given enough credence to is UCF's run defense has been very, very, very poor. And if LSU can run the ball consistently, I think they can move the sticks, and I think they can score points. And I think their offense can function the way it functioned in the Georgia game, where they were able to just kind of keep grinding it out. And then I think UCF can end up in panic mode. I also think because LSU is going to be in a dime package schematically, Devin White gets to be the guy roaming the field at the middle linebacker position. And Devin White is probably the best linebacker in the country. So that ability for Devin White to sort of handle the middle of the field, and he is crazy good if you're a UCF fan. He is exceptional. That gives LSU an edge where this formational stuff isn't probably going to impact them as much because they can stick Devin White in the middle and be pretty good. And frankly, losing their outside linebackers got better at the end of the year, but they weren't a major strength once Chason went down. So I do take LSU in this game, but I'm with you. I think it's tough and close. I don't really have any clue what the outcome's going to be, but I'm going to take LSU 34-27 as a total projection.
And LSU fans are probably mad at me for picking Central Florida, UCF. I don't know that it's unreasonable. I mean, UCF is currently ranked ahead of LSU, so UCF fans shouldn't get a big head about this, which they've been known to do lately on Twitter. You're ranked ahead of LSU. If you want to be in the show, let's kind of have this discussion. If you want to be in the show, you need to beat LSU bad. Like, the barometer is 29-0 because that's what Alabama did on the road with all their players. So I get you don't have McKenzine Milton, but let's say you win this game and it's a squeaker and you give up 30 points to LSU. Alabama ain't giving up 30 points to LSU. I know Georgia did. That was kind of a weird game, but there was a lot, Florida didn't. So I think that's the problem you're facing is there might be some pressing there where UCF's like, we want to continue to show everybody that we belong, and they're going to try to maybe beat them bad, and it might blow up in their face. But you don't get to beat a 4-loss team by a few points and hang another banner. So let's not go that far. I think here's how big of a deal I think Fulton and Williams being out. If everybody was healthy and everybody was playing this game, I would pick LSU. That's how big of a deal. I think you give UCF, McKenzine Milton, but you give LSU both these corners, I'm picking LSU in this game. Everything else about it, I think UCF, like I said, I think they win, but I think that's how big of a loss this is to LSU.
I tend to agree with everything. I mean, LSU's first, honestly, it's almost a lose-lose for UCF. I mean, UCF fans are going to be really excited if they beat LSU. Everybody else is going to groan because you will have beaten a 4-loss LSU team, a team that went 9-4, that is going to finish, if they lose to UCF, somewhere between probably 15th and 20th nationally. You need to beat LSU by more than a squeaker to prove you belong to be in the playoff against, for example, an Alabama team that beat LSU 29-0. That's almost impossible. Right? You've got to be exceptional just to prove you deserve the shot to play in the playoff. It's kind of unreasonable. We've had a long discussion. You can watch our video in the playoffs, but my conclusion at the end of that was I don't like the 18 playoff because I don't like the auto bid because I don't want a 3-loss Washington getting in or last year a 3-loss Auburn getting in. But I am in favor of a 16 playoff because I do think 6 teams gives the ability for somebody like UCF to get a shot. It's a little impossible right now. But to your point, Fulton and Williams are probably both going to start in the NFL as corners. And you basically went from an NFL corner tandem. Like, honestly, those two guys probably, and it's not hyperbole, they could probably start today in the NFL, both of them. So you went from 2 starting NFL corners to what are 2 very average and probably SEC corners in their backups. It is a significant drop-off. and it's just a huge blow to LSU. And I'm with you. And I don't know how much it means, but I think if LSU had those two starting corners, like you said, you'd pick LSU, and I'd probably pick LSU honestly comfortably. But we're never going to know what that game looks like, and it's a serious disappointment to me because I was excited about this matchup a few weeks ago, and then you find out these guys aren't going to play, and it's just a shame.
Yeah, and I do think, in all fairness, I think it's a good equalizer because I would hate to see the backup quarterback have to go against Greedy Williams and Fulton, and like you said, it's not fair to UCF that Alabama's 29-0 is the standard. But you can just look at the defense. I think we can glean something from because nobody's really hurt. Well, I mean, they might be missing a running back. LSU might be missing a running back after the news we heard last night, although they shouldn't. You've got everybody there on LSU's offense. So if they go out and really struggle and they lose 26-13, that's a big deal because the big knock right now on UCF is they probably don't have good defense. They gave up 9,000 yards to Temple. So if LSU on the flip side goes out and puts up 30, 35 points and 500 yards, that's not a good look because LSU's offense sucked this year. Like it did. And LSU fans have been mad at me all year for saying that, but it did. And Insminger's offense, right now, Dave Aranda is why LSU won the games they did, and people aren't calling for Ed Orgeron's head because him hiring his buddy screwed them, and that's the same guy that's going to be coaching the offense in this game. If he goes out there and puts up a number, that tells me that it's the physical difference, the lines of scrimmage, the skill players that are making the difference enough that it probably isn't a good sign for a group of 5 team. Let's wrap this one up. Any more thoughts?
No, I kind of agree with you. This game is a real lose-lose for UCF. They need to win by a lot to prove that they belong, and I think to a certain degree it's going to be unreasonable if the backup quarterback comes in and struggles because that offense hinges so much on the quarterback. If UCF can't run the ball and he's got to be a throw-first guy, they could implode, look terrible, lose a ton of credibility, and it's going to be entirely due to kind of a freak injury and playing a team that has an excellent pass defense. And, we didn't say anything about Delpit this entire conversation, right? I mean, LSU's safeties are probably some of the best in the country. And Delpit or Deontay Thompson, one of them is the best safety. And honestly, I probably hedge towards Delpit.
All right, y'all. Hate to be a bearer of bad news, but this game is probably a lose-lose for both sides, because if LSU wins, everybody's going to say there was no McKenzine Milton, so it doesn't count. But it's still a fun game to watch, clash of styles. I think everybody should keep an eye on this game. And UCF absolutely deserves to be in this discussion. So all you Power 5 football fans, especially you SEC fans, watch them play before you say they don't belong, because that's the hard part for me. At least watch them play. And then you won't look like an idiot when you engage their fans on Twitter. All right, y'all. Let us know in the comments what you think the score is going to be. Let us know how you think these absences are going to impact the game and if it hurts your excitement for the game at all. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.